welcome to the React Native Show podcast in our series React Native at Scale. Today, I have a privilege to have someone, and Mike, I'm going to introduce you in a minute. I'm having someone from big fintech startup Klarna. We're going to talk about Klarna today. We're going to talk about intersection of business and technology with emphasis on the latter. And to do the emphasis on the latter, I have another guest from Callstack, Kuba, who is dealing with, and he's gonna tell you what is he dealing with. So, my first guest, Mike, can you tell us who you are, who do you work for, and what is your role at that organization?
Yeah, sure. So, hi everyone. I'm Mike Duminy. I work at Klarna as a principal engineer and a domain architect. I'm working on the scaling of our front-end technology, especially within our app. So we have a React Native app, and I believe it's probably one of the largest ones. I don't really have any data on that, but I can tell you some high-level figures, which is we have about 400 people working on it, and it's used by tens of millions of people every month. So, hopefully that gives me some sort of white coat that you can trust me. That, that we're doing something here.
I feel like our listeners should know what Klarna is, even if they didn't use the product. The Klarna name is like really quite well known. I'm not sure if everyone knows that you use React Native under the hood, and I'm not sure from those people that know that you use React Native under the hood, if they know that you use Re.Pack under the hood of React Native. Hello, Kuba. How are you?
Hey, so Łukasz already said my name. So I'm a software developer here at Callstack. I'm the maintainer of Re.Pack library. I also am helping with the concept of super apps, and I'm also the author of super app training.
Yeah, so that is our intersection today. We have an intersection of Klarna as a business, Klarna as an organization, and technology as in how technology impacts organization and other ways around. And Kuba is our expert on Re.Pack, and Klarna uses Re.Pack, so it's a great opportunity for us to spend the next 3 hours discussing this. How are you feeling, guys, about that?
Great, yeah. It's good to be in the room with the people that build the tools that we actually use.
Yeah, and thanks so much for coming to Wrocław. We are actually recording from Wrocław, which I like to say is a capital of React Native. And Klarna is based in Stockholm, so you came here yesterday just to record this. And also to have some like coding session probably with Kuba later on.
Yeah, we'll see if we've got enough time for that. That would be cool.
Yeah.
Looking forward to that.
Let's start. Mike, I want to ask you a question. And I want you to answer this from a few different perspectives. So please tell us, what is Klarna as a business and how is Klarna structured as an organization?
Okay, so there's a little bit to unpack there. What is Klarna? Well, I actually didn't know about it at all before I moved to Sweden because I'm originally from South Africa. And it hadn't reached our shores yet. But the way I like to think about it is almost like a Swedish sort of PayPal-ish thing that allows you to buy now and pay later. And but that's sort of what it was when I joined. Since then, we have grown to become more of like a shopping, a company that enables people to shop, right? So that includes a bunch of things. Like we have an app, a consumer offering that is exceptionally wide in its feature set. So you can, for instance, buy things inside the app. You can find things to buy. You can pay for them. You can track the deliveries. You can earn points and rewards from those things and use coupons and all sorts of things. So we're just trying to make shopping like the easiest thing and the best thing.
Sounds like a super app.
It looks like a super app too. It's got on the home screen, you've got like a bunch of links to other bits.
Okay.
I'm not sure if that qualifies it, but yeah, that's sort of how we think about it. So that's the aspect of the business that I work on. Klarna itself is a bigger company than that, and a lot of the business still comes from integrations with merchants. So, for instance, you as a customer, you would go to, let's say, IKEA, and then you would say, "Hey, I want to check out with Klarna, or I want to pay with Klarna," and then it could your debt would then be towards Klarna, not towards the business, and then you can have these flexible payment plans between you and Klarna. So it's also about convenience from that aspect.
So maybe let's. I understand what you're saying. Probably most of your business is what's not visible to the user, right? It's
Right.
like all the processes and like flows that I, as a user, only see the end result of.
Right. Yeah.
I want to briefly touch on my question to you: is it a super app or not? And give that question to Kuba to help us answer this. What is the definition of super apps that you, Kuba, follow in like your super apps training in like Re.Pack materials?
I always like to quote the tweet from Taimiki, which basically said, nobody knows really. But yeah, essentially, if you can divide some kind of, you can divide your app into specific functionalities that serve a purpose, then you got yourself a super app, right? If it's nicely divided and that is kind of reflected in the organizational structure in your company, then you can call that a super app.
I've got a follow up to that. So Klarna went through a redesign to make it into a super app. Internally, we spoke about it like that, and I think that the sort of technical side of that is what holds up quite a few of well, it held up me and my colleagues in thinking about it, because when I think about a super app, I'm thinking of like the Chinese super apps that maybe every single part of it is completely independently deployable and sort of self-contained and can be developed in isolation. But I think a lot of places today are calling themselves super apps when they're not following that necessarily. And that, I'm not saying that's a bad thing. It's just an evolution of the term to be more like an app that has a bunch of functionality that's sort of all exposed to you on the same level. Does that line up with your experience?
That also lines up, yeah. But it's really hard to just stick to one definition. It's super apps is whatever you want it to be, really. In the end,
I also think, like in your example, it was very dev centric. I would say you were saying about like self-contained and independently deployed. Users don't know that.
For sure.
If you change your architecture from one version to another, but the user-facing feature stays the same, does it mean that yesterday you were not a super app and today you are a super app? Probably not. Probably what matters is what is the look and feel of the functionalities that is visible to the user.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think this is something that, like, as technicians, people need to also let go of. This is an evolution of the terminology that we're using.
Yeah. Okay. Going back from super apps, let's go back to Klarna for just a little bit. We will talk about organizational challenges still in the next bit. I want to touch on Klarna's numbers. Maybe what is the scale? Or you already said millions of users are using the mobile app, but what is the scale of the business as a whole?
Yeah. So I can share some numbers with you here. We have over 2 million purchases per day globally. That isn't all through the app. This is on a company level. And we have over 150 million customers from a company level. But if you focus just on the app, we've got about 80 million downloads, roughly 30 million monthly active users of the app. and like for functionality within the app, like people actually using it, like we've got this concept of something being wishlisted. For instance, if you find an item that you want to track the price of, you want to be notified if the price drops or something like this, we've got like 42 million of those. So there's certainly a large amount of of traffic coming to Klarna. It's not clearly like at the super extreme levels, but it's enough to run into some scaling issues or things that just running a small startup can't really think about.
I also have a thought, and this is not a question, just a comment of what you said about your users being distributed along your different features. So it's, I think it poses a nice challenge to have from like analytics perspective to know what users are using what modules of your systems, and how can you like maybe entice them to use some more modules from your system. It's a nice problem to have. Well, this is what I'm saying.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, like so much of our work goes into instrumentation and understanding user behavior. And then trying to be as data centric about that, A/B testing small changes to the app, whether it be a design change in a particular market or it could even just be a wording change, literally. And you A/B test that and you figure out, is this is this driving more traffic or not, or is this like reaching the KPIs or not? But yeah, I guess my point here is that there's like a wealth of, like you said earlier, there's a lot of stuff under the surface that we can't see from the outside. A lot of supporting systems that enable all of this.
Okay. This is a React Native show podcast.
Yeah.
And we should talk a little bit about React Native just to, stay on the theme, let's say. Can you tell us what was the drivers for a decision to bring in React Native first to Klarna? What was the like thought process? What were your goals by doing this? And what is the end result?
Sure. So I wasn't at the company at the time, but because the app has been around for about 6 years and I've been there for 5, I know that before React Native, we had a HTML5 app. And I'm sure it ran into all the problems that we're thinking of when I say that. And so having React Native, I can only speak about as someone who's joined after, but having it has enabled us to sort of set a standard within various touch points from a consumer perspective. So we have a monorepo that has that it feeds our React Native app, but it also holds all the services that service that. And that same code base is used to build our web app and various internal apps and our browser extension as well. So we have got a large shared code base. So, I mean, it's kind of a typical answer, I guess, but one of the main things we get is the fact that we can share so much logic and so many pieces of UI among these different targets. It also means that if you want to add a new target in the future, that becomes really easy to do. So let's say we want to now appear on TVs or something, then as long as we have the correct abstractions in place, and React Native gives us most of that out of the box, and then of course we've got things on top of that like a design system and almost like an in-house expo layer, where we are abstracting some of the platform specifics or the business specifics. The other thing that using React Native gives us is, I mean, we're writing JavaScript on the front end in every platform and on the back end. So we're able to do things like share types, share some support libraries, share tooling even. So the same tooling that builds the front end can, or at least the underlying tooling, and validates that things are correct. All of that can be written in one language and used everywhere without worrying about it. Then also we have a very low barrier to entry to collaborate. So it's much more likely to find someone who writes React these days than it is to find someone who can write Android native code or iOS native code. And even if you do find those people, you need to have two of them. And now you can do that with one. And this is part of I mean, I guess this is true of any sort of project that scales, but once you get to a certain point, you can start to introduce more abstractions so that your feature developers are focusing more on the problem that they're trying to solve. They're not trying to tweak things on each platform necessarily. You give them a framework to work with, and then they just say, oh, cool, I need a screen, I need a button. And it doesn't matter to them what it appears like on these different platforms. Obviously, they're able to like fix problems if they do occur on the specific ones. But this sort of platform agnosticism is super, super important for us at Klarna in getting to the scale that we are today.
Yeah. What I've heard from your answer is that you have very large code base, monorepo. It can produce all kinds of targets from all kinds of like interconnected modules. And honestly, this is not rocket science, right?
Sure.
Like a lot of different products have the same similar structure and similar benefits. So tell us something about maybe some industry, like fintech industry challenges that you solve or you struggle with when it comes to like this kind of architecture and like React Native in particular.
Yeah, I think that there are lots of general fintech problems that are not necessarily made easier by using React Native or JavaScript for that matter. So one of the biggest things is you want everything to be as stable as possible, because especially during like seasons like Black Friday as a payments provider, if you're down for 1 minute, 10 seconds or something like that, you can get a measurable impact on the
Someone will lose their bonus.
So there's a lot riding on the stability of the system.
Yeah.
JavaScript is not terribly stable, I would say. It doesn't have a great history of stability. So this is one challenge, but like I said, it's not specific to React Native. The other thing is compliance. A lot of companies today are building things based on NPM modules, for instance. Just grabbing things off the internet and plugging them in, because why wouldn't you? That's what you do in every project. This is a good practice. We're able to build on top of things. But part of the problem here is that those packages could change, or they could not be compliant in some regulatory rules that could apply to you. So Klarna being fintech, it's not just fintech, it also has a banking license. So it's beholden to a higher standard. And we have to make sure that everything we're using and everything we're doing meets that standard.
So how do you deal with NPM libraries? Those are not necessarily known for their like stability is not a good word, but if something depends on just one person that can like release or change the package on the fly and add like I don't know, like cryptocurrency mining or something like that to their package, so how do you deal with those kind of challenges?
We've got a layer in between us and NPM, and in fact, us and CocoaPods and Gradle and like Maven and all these different things.
So all the dependencies.
Exactly, yeah. So those all go through like an internal mirror, which we control, and we are able then to isolate. If there is a problem with a particular one that we can discover, we can immediately react to it and isolate that and remove that broken version, for instance, from our mirror. And then also on top of that, we are using some sort of dependency scanning as well to make sure that any commonly known problems that people might have, like common vulnerabilities or known vulnerabilities as they come out, we are normally able to tell pretty quickly who is affected inside of the company, because we have this mirror with like a mapping of who's getting what from where. We can track all the audit trails and all that kind of stuff.
So, as a developer, can you walk me through my like onboarding path? I want to add this like new shining cool library because I need to do module 2, right? Mod 2, I want to do it. I don't want to use JavaScript. I want to use NPM package. Weird example, but like this library is needed for some reason. So how would that process look like? Who needs to approve this package? Is someone like really going into all of the files in that package and like checking it and then pulling it into your mirror server? How that does work?
So from my perspective, I don't think anyone's doing that sort of compliance checking. Maybe someone on our security side is going through that, but as we all know, node modules is like it's like an endless abyss. You know, it's just,
we also the meme.
It's an iceberg, right? Yeah. So it's hard to know exactly, like, even if you know what your dependency is using, what are their dependencies using, and so on and so on. So we, to answer your question directly, if someone just wants to add a new library, that's quite simple. They just do it exactly the way you would do it today. You would just add it into your package JSON, or you do yarn add or npm install or something, and these would not trigger any processes internally for us to review that.
Mm-hmm.
But it depends if it's at we leave it to the discretion. Let's put it this way: we leave it to the discretion of the people who are implementing it. So if I'm pulling in a library that is going to it's going to do all the calculations for how much money to pay a merchant or something like that, that is going to be scrutinized.
Oh yeah,
right. But if it's like a left pad, you're not going to care about it too much. It's more about our ability to respond to those issues, because practically it's not possible to audit every single npm package, and so we embrace that, or at least we don't get in the way of it, because that would create too much friction, and rather we focus on like how quickly we can react, and can we statically figure out if anything is bad.
Okay. So we've discussed how is your monorepo structured, how are you using React Native, and what benefits and what challenges do you see with it. Let's maybe now talk about what is the use case that you have for Re.Pack in particular. So React Native, monorepo, we all get that. But Re.Pack is such a unique and I would say even like expensive tool to use, because you have to really invest in like using it. So what was the driving? Oh, sorry. Let's not talk about Klarna yet. Yeah, I was saying it's a very unique tool and like unusual. So what is Re.Pack, Kuba?
Yeah.
What exactly? Maybe let's start with that to make everything clear. So Re.Pack is an alternative to Metro, right? But Metro is a bundler, and we don't like to call Re.Pack a bundler. It's more like a toolkit for Webpack, which is the engine powering all that. And as we all know, Webpack is the most mature bundler around, right? So what it enables, it essentially allows you to tap into the Webpack ecosystem inside of your React Native apps. It enables things like tree shaking, code splitting, or even symlinks, which was a feature not supported in Metro until very recently. So maybe about tree shaking, what it is. It basically is able to deduct what libraries are unused in your code and just straight up remove them, reducing your bundle size, therefore making it smaller download for the end users. But the most important part about what Re.Pack enables,
about tree shaking. I understand the value of tree shaking on web, because like every time you load the web page, you want your bundle to be as small as possible. People have different devices, different internet connections, stuff like that. Why is my JS bundle size that I download just once from Google Play Store or App Store
And probably
important?
Wi-Fi, right?
Yeah, like even if I'm not, like how much can JS weigh? What's the importance of additional like 5 megs or something?
Well, can I just jump in and tell you what the size of the Klarna app when it's not using Re.Pack in dev mode? I think it's about 110 meg bundle, and in production with tree shaking. So I don't know what it is without that, but in production with tree shaking, it's about 40 to 50 megs.
Okay. So you were able to like get to 40% of the initial bundle size, less than that.
Yes, but it's hard to measure because we haven't built it with Metro in such a long time. So it's hard to like production Metro, which may have additional optimizations which could shave off more.
Exactly. It's hard to attribute a concrete amount to just tree shaking, right? But
exactly.
But the point is that the smaller bundle size is especially useful as when your users have bad internet connection, right? And they want to get on your app.
Sure. Probably it also has to do with the interpretation time of like the whole thing.
You would think so. But turns out that, I mean, that used to be the case. And it is still the case slightly at certain sizes. But at Klarna, we've discovered that, using Hermes, it actually doesn't, there's not really an interpretation cost on iOS, regardless of the bundle size, at least not up to the bundle size we're using. On Android, there is roughly a 10% cost there.
Oh, okay.
That might just be a platform-specific difference. But yeah, I've heard something about like Hermes using memory mapping or something like this to make this faster. So that's probably
the underlying mechanism there. Yeah.
Okay, so sorry about the digression about tree shaking. It's just that I'm very ignorant and I don't know.
Yeah.
So thank you for explaining it to me.
Yeah. So maybe let me get back to the biggest feature of Re.Pack, which is code splitting. So what it enables you is to divide your app into many chunks, and you can only load some specific chunks at the beginning of your app when you are loading it. So that can make the startup faster. Obviously, as Mike said, the Hermes kind of made that a little bit obsolete, but I do believe you still have some kind of gains when you have such a big app like yourself, right?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I also wonder things like memory consumption or CPU usage. Maybe there's something there with the size of the initial bundle. But what we always assumed was that the size of the bundle, and what we saw actually when we went through this huge process maybe 2 years ago of improving the startup performance of our app, because it was terrible at one point. I think it was like something like almost 30 seconds on an old Android device. And that was deemed unacceptable for obvious reasons.
Yeah,
so
many users
you don't say.
Just quit by that time it's loud. So
what is it? People disconnect like after 1 or 2 seconds or something. So yeah, we. What was I saying about it? I forgot now.
Investigation of the startup time.
Right. Yes. Okay. So we had this this assumption, which held true before Hermes, that any increase to the main bundle size corresponds to a increase in the time to home, which is our metric that we use to like see from the start time of the app until the time that the home screen of the app after you've logged in is interactive, basically.
Time to interactive,
yeah. And this assumption was held for a long time. And then we started using Hermes and we didn't check it again, but it's yeah, it's no longer really the case that is true. However, for us, we get additional benefits out of this. Like you can't get any tree shaking, for instance, in Metro, right?
Yeah.
But then there's also a bunch of other things within Webpack that Metro might not have, and a lot of optimization techniques and configurations that you can see people out there using for web that were super good for certain cases, but you could never do any of those optimizations on within React Native. But now with Re.Pack you can, and I don't know, maybe Metro will become a like more mature and be able to handle all of these extra optimizations in the future. But one of the other key things, which I think you were getting to there before we got to was module federation. Right?
Yeah, I was getting there. To
Sorry.
explain.
So can I just do the bridge? So you were talking about code splitting, and then module federation is like a next step to code splitting. This is still code splitting we're talking about.
Exactly.
It's just like an evolution of it.
Yeah, it's like a more sophisticated code splitting that allows you not only to extract the parts, like only the your main source code from the, but also allows you to kind of divide into like micro front ends where you can also extract dependencies with it, making it possible to extract even larger chunks and make them completely independent and just load them on the fly then when the app is running.
And load them on the fly, not necessarily from the device.
Exactly, yeah.
But like from remote.
Yeah, that's also possible with normal code splitting. You can also load the chunks remotely, but yeah, module federation is especially useful when you load this remotely.
So it all sounds like Re.Pack is quite a non-standard way of building React Native apps, and it's quite complicated how you are going around with this. So would you say that we all should drop Metro and start using Re.Pack right away?
Absolutely not. Metro is great. So my tip is that if you don't have a specific need for one of the features that I've just mentioned, then there is just really no point in switching to Re.Pack because all of this customizability comes at the cost of harder configuration and worse developer experience compared to Metro, right? The standard way of developing apps with Metro provides a really great developer experience.
I think I've heard something very wise. Let's say yesterday. I was on a meetup, a JS meetup yesterday, and I've heard one speaker saying that if you solve a problem and you don't create smaller problems, it was not a problem. It was a architectural mistake, because you can only solve problems by like trade-offs and introduce. If the app was sound before, you can just split the problem into smaller pieces and like create some new trade-offs, but some problems will still be there. Like it's all about like context and like use cases and all of that. So with that beautiful bridge, what was the use case that Klarna tried to solve this like years ago? When was it that you first tried Re.Pack in your app? 2 years ago?
I think it was 2020 or early 2021. I would have to check the dates, but yeah, it was a while ago, and this was all related to this push to improve the performance. And this is where we were having that assumption that I was talking about earlier, to say that the size of the main chunk or the bundle size is directly proportional to the time to interactive. But yeah, and at the time we weren't using Hermes, I think, on one of the platforms. So, and it was kind of a desperate situation because the performance was so bad, and the company's focus was, let's just make this better. So it was, I think we were sort of following a shotgun approach, where it's like you just spread out and you try and improve as many things as possible, just to get it a little better. That's not to say that we were just doing it like
blindly.
Yeah, of course, the people working on it like knew what they were doing, but I just mean here that it might not necessarily have been like a hyper specific reason why we did it. It was probably more that we saw an opportunity to perhaps impact performance, and it did, but there were lots of other things happening at the same time to also improve performance. To get from 30 seconds, I think, on Android to like 2.5 seconds now is what we're at. So
wait for this. I have a soundboard here.
Yeah, that's correct.
Sorry for interrupting.
No,
Continue.
You should walk around with that, actually. And then on iOS, it's like under a second now. So that's like on par with the industry, I guess. But yeah, so our use case for using it was it was all related to this performance push. And going back, I wonder as well if part of this was because we had an expertise, and we have because we have lots of like web apps as well. We have an expertise in Webpack, and that allows us some lower level control.
I was going to ask you, actually, like this is the question that came to my mind where we were talking about code splitting, tree shaking. If you have web frontend, you use Webpack there, and you use Webpack in your mobile app. Is there an overlap in like techniques that you can use and utilize, and like some maybe common plugins that you use, stuff like that?
Yeah, for sure. But I think that a lot of the stuff we get for free from using Re.Pack sort of replaces the need for a lot of those. But conceptually, it's the same thing. You're still using Webpack. So if you're familiar with Webpack, and there is a cost to using it, of course, but as Kuba said, it is sort of an industry standard for these things.
Okay, so the use case was, let's try to fix performance. Let's try a bunch of things. Re.Pack was one of them.
Yep.
It helped. So what was the process of bringing Re.Pack into after the experimental phase, let's say? How long does it take for organization as yours, the big project as your React Native project and monorepo, to bring in Re.Pack and like just start working with it?
I think that the answer today would be different from the one that it was. So today, I mean, we're investigating module federation, which we touched on, and that is a lot more involved, a much more involved process for us to figure out, is this what we want to do? What are the pros and cons? How do we scale it? How does it work? With Re.Pack, I think it was a lot more. We had a lot more. I don't know how to say this in a really good way, but we had some high performing individuals who really knew their stuff, and there was a lot of trust from the organization to them to say, just do what is necessary to get the performance down. So that process back then was simply, let's try it out in a branch, get everything working, and merge it in. So there was less process behind it. It was more like a sort of a startup approach, which is kind of how Klarna wants its teams to function, as like these mini startups.
Let's talk about that later, because this is such an interesting topic. But these high performing individuals, I know who are you talking about, so maybe you will just say it out loud, because he's really known in React Native community.
Yeah. So I'm talking mostly about Oblador, or Joel Arvidsson, who I think you'd know him from such hits as React Native vector icons, or React Native animatable, or Loki, or like there's a ton of different libraries out there that he has written and maintains. And yeah, he's super good, and it was such a privilege to work with him. And I think I understand his reasoning for doing all of this stuff. So what I'm trying to do is describe it from a historical perspective. And so y'all, if I got it wrong, just let me know.
Yeah, just write in the comments. We'll be happy to have you as a listener. Okay.
So let me just jump in. Today we would be much more process driven, much more like data oriented about it. But yeah, as I said, back then it was a little bit more chaotic because it was like sort of battle stations, all hands on deck. Let's try and solve these problems.
Okay, so you bring in Re.Pack. It took one PR apparently.
Yeah,
a few weeks of work
and a few follow up like fix PRs.
Yeah,
as we discover things. But yeah, I think it was basically a few weeks.
So how did that changed the like day to day of React Native developers on your project? What was their like daily workflow before that change and after that change?
So actually nothing changed for them at all. It was, we don't use, and this is a key difference with us, which I think is probably not really recommended, but it makes sense for
Kuba?
use case. I don't know, actually. You can tell me if you would recommend this or not. Yeah. But we use a different bundler for development and production. So we use Re.Pack for production because that's where we need all these optimizations. But for development, we don't need to optimize as much. And we...
you care about HMR speed and stuff like that.
Yeah, and the developer experience working with Metro, even with such a big app, and it does take a while to start up, but it's a bit better than using Webpack, I think, in dev mode.
Yeah. So that approach can definitely work. I would only be worried that some libraries might get, because there are different resolvers in both of the bundles. So sometimes the library might resolve correctly in Metro and might not resolve correctly in Webpack. But other than that, you should be good to go.
Yeah, I guess you could. And I wonder if we're doing this now. You've got me thinking now. Wonder if we could have like the same resolution strategy in both.
I was once looking into the subject. It's kind of very deep. You would have to you would need to patch some packages to actually make it work. It's doable, but it's not like you could actually make a nice solution out of it that would be maintainable.
Yeah. Yeah.
But sure. Yeah, you can definitely hack it around and have the same resolution algorithm in there.
Okay. I'm going back to like day to day of the developer. Nothing changes. That's great. That's great for me. How about the release process? How about let's maybe take a step back. How do you release your products at all from this monorepo? So how do you develop features and then publish them?
Yeah. So I mean, it's kind of a complicated answer.
You don't say.
Because I'm trying to figure out like what level of detail to give you. But basically we have about 70 odd teams who are working on this code base. So maybe I need to take a step back to kind of contextualize
it. I was trying to go from the release process to the teams, but we can do it the other way around as well.
Okay, so no, let's try the release process to the teams. Let's see if this is going to work.
Okay.
Okay, so our release process is we release our web app multiple times a day. So this is all automated, and I would say it happens about 10 to 15 times a day, maybe, depending on how much stuff is getting merged in, how many commits are eligible for release. And we have a bunch of like checks and balances to make sure that the versions we release are actually functioning, at least to some basic level. So we have canary tests. But if you're talking about our React Native app, we have daily builds of an internal facing app that all of the Klarna employees can, they have them automatically pushed to their devices. So everyone's always using the latest one.
Mm-hmm.
But then our actual release cycle to the public is weekly. So every week we sort of cut off, branch off, and then we literally just like spin up a CI and say, quickly build this, distribute it, and then we test that amongst all of these different teams. So everyone has to sign off on the release, which can take some time because obviously there's competing priorities, and with such a frequent release process, I mean, a week is kind of fast, I think, in the industry, and so there's a lot going on.
When you say everyone, you mean every 70 teams?
Maybe. I mean, I don't think it's literally all 70. I think that some of them are just like, well, we didn't change anything.
Okay.
Or even, I mean, that's the tough thing because you don't actually know what is impacted.
Mhm.
It's really hard to statically tell if there's if there's going to be an impact. So we've got some internal tools to try and figure that out. But yeah.
Let's talk about them after we talk about teams.
Sure. So ultimately, everyone should be testing. Every team should be signing off,
Mhm.
and they have a few days to do that, and then we release. I think that's fairly standard. It's just like extra steps for us. That's all.
Do you always go through Apple Store and Google Store, or do you do OTA over the air?
Yeah, so we do a weekly release through the stores, and then we do over the air releases of just the JavaScript where like when necessary. So if there's like some sort of thing that needs more urgent updating, you know, it could be something like the legal text is slightly wrong. We need to quickly fix that. Or it might be a bug that prevents someone from doing something. If it's serious enough, then we can push out an update over the air. And maybe I'll just quickly touch on that. We built an in-house process that works on top of Re.Pack actually, and to allow us to do this. So that's one of the other benefits we actually get from Re.Pack, which is we're able to, as I mentioned, our app is like, let's say 40, 45 megs of JavaScript. If you only change one line, we don't want to push out another 45 megs of JavaScript. We'd rather push out as small a piece as possible. So using code splitting, we can actually do that, and using the Webpack runtime and the Re.Pack like plugins into that, we're able to redirect some parts of the code to load the new bits of the new chunks that we download. So basically, we can just download the diff and then serve and then load that into the app at runtime instead of sort of loading it completely remotely. We do it all locally on the device.
I'm not sure if I'm going to be able to recover from this, but I have another follow-up question to this.
So, are you making notes of that?
I don't know where we are in the breadcrumbs.
Okay.
We'll try. So what's the splitting points for your code splitting? You have a set of clearly defined chunks of code that you split your app.
Yeah, we have we split based on the route that you're on. So teams develop features, and those features provide sort of a list of routes that you can navigate to. And we sort of try to follow the web-based approach, which is when you go to like /about or something, you know, some URL, you're going to only load the bits of code that are necessary for that one. And so we try to sort of follow the same approach on native, where the what we call the async boundary is actually at the route level. So only as you load the route will we load any additional chunks that are necessary. And I mean, when I say we do this, like a lot of it's just automated because Webpack and Re.Pack.
Okay. So if I made a mistake or the legal text has to be changed in the about page, would I download the whole about page chunk, or would I download just a part of this?
We would operate on the chunk level for that. So you would download the about page chunk and maybe one or two other ones which could have, because there is a bit of a black box when you build with with these bundlers, they might make a decision where now you have 2 chunks instead of 1, or they might combine them or something like this. So we just, I mean, our approach is kind of basic with this, because I mean the simple one is also easier to understand. So we have, if you need to perform an over-the-air update, you would make your change, and then you would build the app and compare that built app to the app that we release to customers. And you can like compare the JavaScript directly. You can say, oh, look, these are the files that changed between these 2 versions. Package up that difference, and then make that the diff that we ship to people.
So, and this is your custom solution.
Yep.
Kuba, what is the standard way of achieving like similar benefits?
I'll actually get back to that. I just got one follow-up question from Mike. How do you? Because I can't stop thinking about this. How do you deal with different versions of Klarna app on your in the wild, right? And
the diffing
process, right? Because you have to. Sometimes there's going to be more diff for the older versions of the app, right?
Yeah, that's a good question. So we operate at the version level for that. So we're surgical on it. So we say, if you need to make a change, let's say you discover this problem in the version of the app that we released like 2 weeks ago or something, then you know that it's in that one and all future versions. So firstly, you fix it in our main branch. And then now you know versions released from now will have the fix. But then you need to go back and say, I know those 2 versions, and everyone in our ecosystem within Klarna knows like about our release process, and they all are aware it's weekly, and you know like where their changes would be. So they would then go and cherry pick those fixes onto the release branches, and then you'd create a separate over-there update for each one. So it's not that we're like, I mean, the dream is that you can just say, here is new JavaScript and just run it. But you, like practically, that's very difficult to do. Not only because you want to be more surgical for like data saving reasons, but you also want to ensure that between versions, where something in the native side could have changed. And we do have some native code in our app, and we have native developers that are working on that. And if those libraries are not compatible with the new JavaScript that you built today or something, then it's not going to work. So we have to be surgical about it today. We would like to get to, and we've got some plans, and maybe module federation can be the way to solve this for us. But yeah, maybe we can talk about the future plans for us afterwards. But yeah.
Cool. Yeah.
And now
yes. Yeah, Łukasz, could you please repeat the question? Because
I'm gonna. Klarna has a custom built way of doing the OTA based on Re.Pack under the hood, but they've implemented a lot of like different, special sauce on the top. What is the standard way in Re.Pack? Like, there are different OTAs in the wild. Code push, expo update.
Yeah.
What is the standard way of doing this in Re.Pack?
Well, Re.Pack offers you a utility to actually just load the chunk on the fly. It's a very simple utility, but what we help with is essentially locating that chunk, downloading it, and loading it, right? So it's very simple, but it helps to achieve what Klarna actually did. So we only care about that bit in Re.Pack, and the rest is kind of up to user to implement.
Okay. What about the module federation in like the OTA area?
It actually uses the same mechanism underneath to load the chunk. Okay. So there is still that part under the hood that does the loading, but what just changes is how the chunks get loaded, because in module federation you first load the container chunk, which is like an entry point, and then you load the rest of the chunks as needed.
Yeah. Okay. we are like 3 levels deep in digression.
Yeah, let's try and back up.
Yeah, I'm not sure where we were. So let's maybe go to the area of discussion that I really want to like flesh out and I really want to like pick your brains about. So you use, let's back up even more from the beginning. A lot of users, like huge money. The uptime needs to be perfect. Huge team. You said 400 developers.
Yeah, it fluctuates between 350 and 500. Yeah.
React Native, Re.Pack in it, like all the other services. So how the hell is your team structured to have timely weekly releases, or to have 10, 15 releases of your web, probably similar number of like different microservices for your backend, and then once a week to create a releasable app. So how is your team structured to accomplish all of this?
So the way that Klarna, like a couple of years ago, before I joined, they switched what they call their operating model to optimize for continuous improvement, let's say, where I think traditionally you might look at like a large organization and say, okay, they spec out a big project and then you can work on that project, and like everything about it is sort of predetermined in a waterfall sort of scenario. But with Klarna, what it tried to do, and I think what our CEO sort of hinted at one point was that it's hard for Klarna, which was a startup many years ago, and I guess you could like, yeah, I guess it's not technically a startup anymore, but like it still has a lot of that mentality of
Move fast and not break banking things.
Exactly, yeah, just move fast.
Yeah.
So it's hard to compete with other startups because at a startup you don't really care that much about breaking things. You rather and you're not scared to just take on massive things and just throw like a new product provider or something at it. Yeah, I need to solve notifications. Let me just get this provider, just throw it in, whatever. Obviously at Klarna, it's a little bit, when the organization gets big enough, it becomes harder to do those sorts of things. You can't make as flippant decisions. So, but anyway, like my point here is that the way that Klarna is structured internally is you have these like sort of layers. So you have like a domain, and the domain has groups within it, and the groups have teams, and each team has its sort of it owns a vertical slice of some problem that it needs to solve. And so within the app's context, what that means is maybe someone owns the about screen, like we were talking about earlier. Maybe there's a team that just owns that screen. Or maybe there's a team that owns a button on that screen. Okay, that's literally like the level that some of these things are at. And then they won't only just own the button, they'll own all the logic behind it on the client, as well as the logic that goes to the backend, and maybe even a few layers deep within the backend as well. But our systems are all set up to handle this. So, for instance, any change you make to the backend is automatically deployed for you and monitored in this canary releases. Anything you do the front end, the same thing for web. But because of this, let's call it I don't mean in a negative way, but like say it's like a fractured or splintered way, like a web that is there's how the company is organized. This does make it a little bit challenging to all come together and say, let's package this experience up for a customer now.
Yeah.
But I don't have a good answer for you other than like somehow it works. We have some dedicated people and processes that keep the energy up to like, chase people and say, all right, got this new release coming out. Like, let's stay on board with all this. Of course, what it can mean is that maybe your original plans don't always work out, because you're trying to do everything, but that's fine. It's a highly agile organization in that respect.
It's such a fascinating journey you took us through, because like usually in my experience, I cannot say that I've been in like many projects, but like in the projects that I've been, it is usually the experience of this is a dev team. They take the requirements from product team and you just implement the requirements and like, but in your case, what you've described is that you have this teams that are really interdisciplinary.
Yep.
They have different people sitting on the teams and they own in like really true sense the splice of the whole product.
Exactly. So in that sense, you could think of every team as a product team.
Yeah.
Like you own the customer experience and the things that like add to that. That includes, for instance, that if your team was creating virtual credit cards or something like this, you would own the back end that actually goes and generates that card. You're not only just owning the front end piece, because by layering it that way, like there's less ownership. If you were to have just a front end team or just a back end team, there's a little bit less ownership about the problem space. But what actually matters is that a user can get one of these cards and use them. So by optimizing for an actual user problem or optimizing for an actual like business problem, then you're able to you can make decisions and like take trade-offs. And it's all within your realm. Like that's what I was saying earlier, like the teams are sort of like startups. They've got their own problems, their own KPIs, their own things that they're trying to solve. And in the business, of course, there are overarching things like there are product directions coming down the line.
Oh yeah.
We want to be doing this.
I got a question. How do you decide who owns what code? How is it structured in your app?
This is a good question. We have we've got a model. Hang on, how do we decide it, or how do we enforce it?
How do you enforce it?
Okay, yeah. Right. Because I'm not exactly sure how we decide it. We sort of give people a bit of freedom with that. So there is a little bit of self-organization with how teams decide to like split up their quote unquote features, whatever they might be. But we enforce it not using a code owner's model that is popularized by GitHub and those providers, but we use something that is more maybe it's not more familiar, but it is familiar to JavaScript developers. We use a field in a package JSON. So what that means is if the repo is like a tree, and the root of the tree has a package JSON, and that has like a team variable in it, and there's team field, and maybe team is like, I don't know, the core team or something. Then everything below that is owned by that team until it encounters another package JSON that has this field in it with a different team name. And this actually sort of mimics the way that node modules are resolved as well.
Yeah, that sounds very, very similar. Yeah.
Yeah. So what's nice about that is that you can actually take ownership of small folders within other parts of the code that might, in general, be owned by someone else. But we operate actually at a what we call a package level or a Yarn workspace level. So we've got about like 4,000 of those in our client's repository.
That's a lot.
And some of those are really small, but some of them.
There were a lot of numbers in this episode, and we hear millions, thousands, and all of that. The scale is huge. This is what we are saying. 4,000 workspaces. That's quite a lot. I really like the algorithm for like like the maintaining of the ownership. And so like as a developer, I can know whom should I ask about like this piece of code, or like during the PR review. I guess it's like kind of automized.
Yeah, we've
to-
got like a merge checker that sees like, oh, you've made this change, so you can't improve your own code, of course, but then it builds up a list of teams or owners for the changed files that you've made in your pull request, and says, okay, well, what teams own these files, and then it will post a comment with a link to like the team and the team channel on Slack. And
Mhm. Oh yeah. Yeah.
So,
Tooling. I love tooling. Let's back up. This is an episode of React Native at Scale. We want to get to the bottom of intersection technology versus organization versus business. And what you've been saying about your team structure, independent teams creating almost independent pieces of the product, it reminds me of something. Kuba, what it is? What
I think you're thinking about Conway, though, right?
Yeah. So we have this concept of Conway law. I'm not gonna repeat it here, but our head of technology, Mike.
I'll try to explain. So it basically is that the communication structure within the company kind of reflects the final design that gets made, right? And that was true for many cases before. So that's why it was kind of invited. But this guy Conway, we have actually a talk available on our site from our head of technology, as Łukasz was saying, Mike Pierzchała. Talk is called The Invisible Architect. So if you want to read up on that, please do check it out.
Yeah, and the talk is called Invisible Architect, but it seems like in your case, it was a really thought out decision. Like it was clear that we are going to make those teams as pseudo startups inside our organization so that they can create features like structured in this way. So it was like really
but I guess there's the inverse law as well, right? Which is that however you structure your code can bubble up, and it changes like how the organization is as well. And now I'm wondering, is this how we want to be? Is this like is there like a responsibility as someone who is architecting this to make sure that it aligns with the organization as well? You're not like driving the organization in a different direction. But yeah, it's an interesting theory. And I think that it holds true for us because everything I'm describing about how sort of isolated or how broken apart like all the bits of even just the app are, and our ownership model enables this as well. Like all of these things sort of line up with this idea that, well, if our operating model as a company is to break things into small pieces that teams can own, then that sort of plays itself out in our code structure as well.
Okay, we have time to talk about one more thing, but I have two things on my list, so I let you decide. Okay. We can talk about your engagement as Klarna. Let's back up a little bit. Like open source in organizations like Klarna, not necessarily what you're doing in this space, but what are your thoughts around this? Or maybe we can talk about the more technical things still, like module federation in Re.Pack, and what are your future plans of like Re.Pack module federations at Klarna? Your pick.
I feel like there's like a bit of overlap with them. We'll probably end up talking about both either way.
Let's do that.
I can tell you a little bit about our about what we want to be able to do with our architecture.
Mm-hmm.
So what I've been doing now is describing the architecture that we have and like the situation we find ourselves in, like almost as an observer. This is what I see. This is my experience. But what we're trying to do now is Klarna really wants to be able to have a sort of a cohesive experience across all customer touchpoints. So internally, we call it like a Netflix-like experience. Like you start watching on one device, and then you switch over to another device, and then you just pick up where you left off. We've got a couple of examples of this inside of our products, but we are trying to standardize as much as possible throughout the organization to enable this sort of thing where every product has the ability to like link into other ones, and they share a feature set, and you don't have things that are like, oh, this is only app specific, but it doesn't make sense. It could have been on the web as well. It doesn't have to, like, obviously things like Apple Wallet integrations, that's probably going to be on the app only, right? But there's no reason why other internal or other features that we have shouldn't be everywhere. And we want to enable this world where like you can be everywhere without much cost as a feature team. So you're developing a feature and you exist within your, like, let's say you're originally thinking, oh, I'm only going to like have this surface on the native app. But we don't even want you to think like that. We want you to think like, here's a Klarna feature. And because you write it a certain way, it could be on any of our touch points. It could be in our Klarna app, could be in a different app that we might release. I don't know. Or it could be on the web or in browser extension or on our on Klarna.com or on various of our like the companies that we might own or work with. So sort of this ability to just deploy everywhere all at the same time from a single piece of code, that is
the end goal.
Yeah, that's where we're trying to get to. And it's quite challenging, as you could imagine. But this is why we're eyeing things like module federation, because that sort of tells that story as well.
Yeah, like getting back from the beginning, the monorepo, the React Native, the JS, the like Re.Pack, Webpack, all of that were, I feel like, steps to that goal.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, even when we're talking about code ownership now and the team structures, they are also like all aligned with this. Like imagine a team could own a button and everything behind it. And I mean, today they can deploy their backend changes immediately. Why can't they do the same thing for their front end changes on all of our touch points? So like independent deployability, actual isolation, sort of this like a plug-in architecture where you can just like add new features, remove them, and sort of have more control as an organization and a more cohesive experience across all of your touch points. That's the dream. But yeah, standardization with this kind of stuff is kind of hard.
Yeah. So last question of this episode, and we are wrapping up. And the last question is: so how can Module Federation help out with this? How do you see the role there? Like what's the technical explanation for this?
So Module Federation, my mental model of it, and I'm going to ask Kuba to verify.
I'll try to help.
So my mental model of it is it's sort of like if you think of a single project being this big tree. In fact, in the same way that we could enable code splitting today, you take a tree and you break it off into separate branches. You can sort of think about Module Federation like this as well, where you have like a product that you're trying to release, like an app or something. And what Module Federation allows you to do is say parts of the app are resolved at runtime. And those can bring in all their dependencies, and any of the dependencies they bring in are loaded into like the running sort of process, and then they can be shared by other parts of the app as well. So it's not like completely separate apps that are all loading all of their own dependencies together. It's like they are isolated, but they can be deployed in isolation. They're resolved at runtime, but they can all contribute back to a single shared sort of cache of modules. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's absolutely right. Yeah, there's this one single. Well, it actually can be multiple, but let's stick with a simple example. Yeah, you can have a scope where you got these shared dependencies, and then you can reduce the duplication in your code. But at the same time, it allows you to, if some of your, let's say, mini apps wants to use different version of a JS library, you can still load that in and have two copies of library. One is older, that is compatible with the rest of the app, and one newer one.
Yep.
Okay, thank you guys. That's a wrap up. But I will do the conclusion, the wrap up of this episode. So thank you, Mike. Thank you, Kuba, for joining me on the episode of the React Native Show podcast in a series React Native at Scale. And boy, that was a scale. It was a great episode. I'm really happy about this. We talked about React Native in fintech and in Klarna in particular. We were talking about using Re.Pack at scale in the place it's supposed to be. We were talking obviously how the organization impacts technology and how technology impacts organization. And we are looking for more businesses using Re.Pack and to get your insights about it. So reach out to us, reach out to Kuba. He'll be more than happy to find out more about the wild Re.Packs running into the wild. So, and we encourage everyone to try out Re.Pack and share your thoughts with us. So that was it. Thank you so much, guys. Thank you so much, listeners, and see you in the next one.